Hello, SOSers.
Hello.
Hello. Cheers.
Cheers.
Good one.
We're back.
We're back and ready to party. Really are.
Molly, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, please.
Are we on Patreon?
Oh, yeah. Have you guys ever heard of Patreon? We say this a lot, but a lot of you might not know what that even is. Really easy. It's a site to help you could support us financially. We have three options. So $3 a month, $7 a month, or $11 a month. And you get various benefits for joining that tier, including behind the scenes content and also bonus footage from extended interviews. So, for example, our alien episode with Chris Crutchfield, that episode went on and took some tangents that are really fun to go down, but we couldn't include it in our full episode. So if you want the bonus content from that, you can join a Patreon tier for just the low cost of what I just mentioned. And it really helps us grow, helps us build a community.
Helps us, drink more wine.
Yeah.
So we're more unfiltered for your pleasure.
Exactly. So that's patreon.com, patreon.com. And then you can search us on there, SOS with Molly and Alyssa.
Yep. Or the links in our bio too.
Mm-hmm.
You can go there and it'll link you right to our little Patreon.
That's right.
And you're going to get some more content. And speaking of content, we've got amazing content today.
Yes, we do.
We have the amazing she's a spiritual hypnotherapist, which sounds so fucking dope.
Sounds like what we all need. Am I right?
Exactly. Her name's Moyra Michelle. She's amazing. She has her own podcast called the Old Soul Social Club podcast. You have to check it out. She's so amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And she talks specifically about your old soul and your mental health journey and your spiritual journey and getting unstuck and all that.
And healing traumas in a way. Like a lot of people, obviously talk therapy is very popular and it's very important. But there isn't one way to work through things, and the same thing doesn't work for everybody. And so, there's a lot of alternative methods out there, and she is here to enlighten us.
Yep. So please follow her at Moyra Michelle. We're going to tag her on our Instagram, so check her out there. And then, check out her podcast, Old Soul Social Club podcast. But first, enjoy her on our podcast.
All right. Welcome, Moyra. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's so good to be here, ladies. Thank you for the invite, and I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Oh my gosh, the pleasure is all ours.
Yes.
There's so much we want to get into because spiritual hypnotherapy sounds so fascinating. And
I know virtually nothing about it, and I'm so intrigued by it because all healing modalities I feel like every different modality is a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
So it's like you can't just do always one thing. And so I always want to learn what more people are doing, what works for other people, other cultures, whatever, just because there's so many things we don't know in the world, in the universe, and different ways to achieve different things.
Yeah. So first, before we get into all of that, I want to know kind of what you were thinking for like an SOS moment.
Yeah, well, so when I started to think about this, I do recognize in myself an SOS moment, but I didn't recognize it at the time.
Yes.
And I think that's one of the problems, right, with the SOS, the wake-up call kind of thing, is you have to be aware, you got to be tuned into it.
Yep.
And that's as well why sometimes things get so bad, why your SOS moment is like this big catastrophe.
Yes.
Is actually when you look back, you can actually see, oh man, there was SOS after SOS after SOS.
Right, like all the signs along the way.
Yeah. And so for me, so I remember driving. I was home for Christmas. So I was in the US. I had just moved here. I was back in Ireland and I was having a really hard time in my job. I work with some very difficult people. And it was just a very difficult environment. I'll just leave it at that. And so I remember thinking that, man, if I were to crash my car and I would be hurt in hospital or something, maybe they'd be nice to me.
Wow.
And I didn't even think that at the time, like I didn't even recognize, man, that's messed up.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But yeah, years later, when I would get out of that job and I would get out of the corporate world and all of that, I look back and I was like, man,
Yeah.
That's pretty intense stuff. And actually, I got out of that job, not because I wanted, I was devastated when I got out of that job because so I had moved here to the US and I had met this wonderful man just within the first few months and we were really hitting it off. The job was difficult, but I was like, you know, Miss Corporate, give 110% person.
Yes.
And I've been like, yeah, this ruthless stuff is like, I can do it because I get to wear a nice suit. But yeah, I ended up, you know, universe intervened where my bosses were like, we can't leave you here in this environment anymore. We just cannot.
Wow.
They were recognizing that it wasn't healthy for me to stay here, but I was devastated at the time because that meant going back to Ireland.
Yeah.
And even though that eventually led me going to London, like my life becoming out like exactly as it was supposed to intend, it was just, man, that time and everything just, I look back and that was an SOS.
Yeah, that's huge. And is that how did you get into holistic healing and hypnotherapy from there?
Yeah, so from there, really, I've been really fortunate to be very guided. I just listen to my intuition and what comes next. And I was actually in the corporate world, so all I wanted to do when I was a little girl, I just wanted to work in an office. That's like wear a little suit, look like Louise Matheson, look real cute, going to meetings. I didn't really know what people did in offices,
right?
But
Something with paper.
Smelled good when they left.
Yeah.
So that was kind of it for me. And so then when I did get to go work in the corporate world and I did start to get these jobs that sounded cool from the outside, and I got inside and it was just not very fulfilling at all.
Yeah.
And so I was living in London at the time. So my career was going like checking all the boxes, but I was actually becoming less interested in it.
Yeah.
And that's when, you know, there was like just so much to do in London. So then I was really expanding my creativity at that point. So then I moved back to the US and there was a whole load of visa wrangling stuff where I wasn't able to start applying for jobs. And with the foreign, whatever you call it, department, there was nothing I could do.
Yeah.
And it could be 6 weeks or it could be 6 months. The whole process had like proven very unpredictable.
So stressful.
So there's no way I could go out and apply for jobs. So I started to more indulge my creativity. And that's when it clicked with me, was that the reason that, you know, in the corporate world that we're all heading towards that burnout and getting less engaged and more disinterested is because we weren't exercising our creativity, and that whole right side of the brain is just shut down, and that whole part of us, that most deepest soul part of us, that creativity is an expression of, is all being just muted. Yeah. So that's when I came up with my first business. It was called Antidote Creativity, because creativity is the antidote.
I like that.
And so what it ended up being was like a street art therapy kind of a thing, because I didn't know there was such a thing as art therapy, but that turns out like that's what I was doing, running like creative classes so that people could just like be and express themselves. But anyway, that business went terribly, awfully going down because I didn't know about entrepreneurial mindset.
Right.
So yeah, that one just nosedived. And then I started to wonder what was wrong, because I'd already set up businesses on behalf of my employers. So I knew, and I had a master's specializing in entrepreneurship. I knew I had everything within me, but it couldn't come out.
Apply.
Like it was just stuck. Yeah. And so then I asked the universe for guidance. I started then my spiritual awakening started to happen. So I asked the universe for guidance, said like, I need a mentor, because I started to look for jobs again. And so I met up with this woman and we started talking. I was like, I think she's my mentor. I don't know who she is or what she does, but I think she's my mentor. So I went up and chatted to her, and she was a coach. So I was like, okay.
Oh, wow.
Seems like I asked for the universe to send me someone. They sent a professional.
Right.
This is fortunate.
Yeah.
So from there, I learned about the entrepreneurial mindset, money blocks, fear, loss, like the whole, everything like that. And I ended up then training to be a coach. And it'd be kind of along the spiritual life coach kind of the career. But then I felt like there was something else, and I came across hypnotherapy, and I'd never really heard anything about it before. But I did a short program that was just an off-the-shelf program where I would listen to these recordings. These were generic recordings. It wasn't specific to me or anything. And so I listened, and each week there was a different recording. And I remember this particular week, the recording was about success, about being successful. And one of the mantras was that successful people do what they don't want to do, and they do it first. You know, that eat the frog kind of mentality.
Yes.
And so I remember I listened to it in bed. I came downstairs and I was like, ugh. I'd had like friends over the night before, and it was a mess, and there was dishes everywhere. And I just walked over to the sink and I started doing the dishes. I was like, wait, who is this person?
Like, it's
this
working.
is not me. And it's like, whoa. Like, I was like, if just listening to these generic recordings has just created the tiniest bit of behavioral change.
Yeah.
That is huge.
Yeah.
So then I started to investigate it more. I went and I had a personal session with the hypnotherapist. The breakthroughs were just phenomenal.
Really?
And that's where I was like, maybe I should be a hypnotherapist. And anyone who's an entrepreneur knows there's the shiny object syndrome. So I was like, okay, just hold for a bit. Just don't go chasing after everything, right? Hold.
Yeah.
And so I said to the universe, you know, if this is for me, make my desire for it stronger. And if it's not, let it just fade away. But a couple of months later, I just couldn't resist anymore. And I was like, this is for me. And I didn't even have the money to pay for it. But I was like, the money will just
will come.
And actually, it was a funny story. They accidentally didn't start charging me until I was graduated and able to pay for it. Yeah.
Wow.
Interesting.
So yeah, it's a great
wow.
Finding my calling was a process of listening to my intuition. And from the moment I did my first hypnosis, I brought someone into regression and they had amazing results. I just knew it was for me. I was like, that's it. This is for me.
Yeah. My what I knew about it before this, obviously, but my mom used a hypnotherapist to quit smoking. And she had tried everything to quit smoking cigarettes like years ago. She tried everything, the patches, everything, nothing. And she just describes, like, I think she just did one session. I could be wrong. I'll have to ask her again. She just did one session and she's just like, I don't know. I can't even tell you. She said she remembers like a part of the session, her therapist had told her to imagine licking an ashtray. And that was like one of the things that like was like seared into her brain. So every time she thought about a cigarette, she thought about licking an ashtray. It was like very subtle, just things that, like you said, a behavioral change that she adopted.
What hypnotherapy does is there's two ways that it works so deep. And the first part is about being open and being aware. And so, you know, the hypnotherapy, that trance has been around for millennia, and it just brings us into this other state of consciousness. So then the awareness comes from where you just, we're peeling back that conscious layer, and that conscious layer comes with a whole layer of defensiveness and protection and that armor around your heart and that inner critic that's telling you to shut up and all those kinds of things. All of that, we peel that away so that your subconscious, or I believe it's your soul, can actually start to speak and communicate to you and tell you what it is it's been trying to tell you. It's been trying to tell you something, but you haven't been listening. So instead it's sent like depression and anxiety and self-doubt and all those things. So when we go into this state of hypnosis, we can actually speak to that part of you. Now, the other part is that you're very suggestible when you're in that state. So if we peel away all of that self-defense and everything, all of that, who's out to get me stuff. And if I say to you during that time, if I say, you know, you're powerful beyond measure, you'll be like, I am powerful beyond measure. That is so true. and so that's how the cigarette stuff works. Is that it's about these suggestions and, like you say, kind of searing them in. But the other part of it is that if you consciously want something, and you also have the will and the capability to do the thing,
right?
But yet it's not happening. That means there's something in the subconscious that's not allowing it to happen. So even with something that, the tobacco addiction seems like a sort of not the most serious thing, but there's something missing there. There's some connection that needs to be made.
Yes.
Yeah.
In order to do that. So that's kind of how it works behind the scenes.
Are you like
Cool.
when I'm trying to I mean, I've never had a session, so it's like, is the client conscious? Like you kind of just described it, but how is it different from, with talk therapy where you could say all these things to somebody, and how do you get them? Is that state that they're in similar to when you're just waking or just falling asleep? Is it like that?
Yeah, that's exactly what it's like. So it's just like a state of relaxation. Hollywood has a lot to answer for with the way, Get Out and all those things, right? Or like stage hypnosis stuff, right?
Right.
That's not what real hypnotherapy is about. But what it is about is that relaxed state. It's almost like, like you say, the going in or out of sleep, or the other things, when you're in flow, when you're in that concentration mode, someone asks you something, you shoot back the answer and you're like, wow, that was concise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it's like, is like that we make the other part of your mind that wants to kind of like defend you and protect you from all this, whatever it is. We kind of just send that off to have a little nap, and then we allow this truthful part. So you remember everything. We're talking just like in talk therapy, it's me and you, and we're talking about what's from the past. Now, the difference is when you go into talk therapy, it's like, so how you doing today? What you want to talk about? And then you have to kind of like just say, oh, feeling okay, and, go with whatever memory or however that goes. But in hypnosis, what we do is we instruct the mind to go back to exactly the point that is relevant. And so a lot of people, then this is scary. If you've been through trauma, this is scary. You'll assume, oh, I'm going to go back to being abused as a child, or I'm going to go back to, some horrific scenes. But often, and the work of Gabor Mate is really great around trauma. Often at times it's not actually the traumatic event that is the most significant part. It's actually the parts after and what you make it mean. So someone might have had an extremely abusive mother, that was a narcissist or something like this, alcoholic. But they'll actually, instead of going back to being berated or beaten or whatever that awful experience was, they'll go back to sitting in a classroom. And it was the day that they realized that their mother doesn't love them, and that nobody loves them, and that they don't matter in the world. And that is the way more damaging belief.
Yes.
Than anything to do with the abuse is the belief that we bring on ourselves to justify, because we have to make sense of it.
Yes.
Why else would my mother treat me like this? Only that I'm worthless.
Yeah.
Why else would it be? But it's my fault that my father left, or these things. And as kids, the irony, it's a cruel irony that most of our personality is formed before we're 7 years old.
Wow.
And this, when we're like 4 or 5 years old, is this the best time to be, deciding how the world works, and like who we are in the world, and do we deserve love, and how do we get love? Absolutely not, right? We're so open to misinterpretation.
Yes.
And so, an example I use is that, you're lost in the grocery store, you're 3 years old, right? We know now, like, oh, it's fine, you'll be found or whatever, but you're 3 years old, you're tiny. You've lost the adult that cares for you, that is everything to you, and you're only 3, so she might be gone forever. You might never ever see her again. Now, that is trauma. I call it trauma with the big T versus trauma with the small t. Trauma with the big T is like, it's the abuse, the divorce, the illness, that stuff where you're like, yeah, that's traumatic shit.
Yeah.
But the trauma with the small t is like, that day, that's big trauma then, but you're not, then you get found, right? You get found like 3 minutes later, but it's like 3 hours for you when you're 3 years old, right? And then a couple of years later, mom will forget to pick you up from soccer practice or something like that, and you'll be like, I'm abandoned. I knew it. I knew that I was going to be abandoned. I don't know how I know, but I knew.
Yeah.
And then it happens again at 10. And then like when you're a teenager, you get abandoned by your childhood sweetheart kind of thing. And you're like, I know it. I know I'm going to be abandoned. You get to adulthood and you're like, I have this feeling I'm going to be abandoned.
And you're just like, oh, I must be forgettable. I must be...
And you also feel like you're a bit crazy because you look back, you're like, there's nothing actually in my past that says that I've never actually been abandoned. Mm-hmm. But what's happened is called an imprint. And that imprint, when you're 3 years old, it's this thought, it's this belief, and then we look for evidence for that belief. And also, because it's so traumatic to us, we have to be like, we remember it. Like, we have to like make sure it stays at the forefront. And that we do that by constantly looking for evidence that we're going to be abandoned.
Wow.
That's why every slight, everything in the playground, everything goes like, yeah, I can be abandoned at any time.
Wow.
And that could be said for so many things, right? It could be said for like, finding issues with boundaries, finding issues with general trust and
absolutely. It all gets identity. The seeds all get planted at a very young age. And there's stuff that we go back to the womb sometimes. Actually, we go back to past lives sometimes.
Yeah.
That stuff gets planted that early.
Yeah. That makes me... Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, that reminds me, because you talk a lot about old souls, and I wonder, like, how does that kind of correlate? And if you can kind of describe, because you do a lot of work with, like... old soul work, and I find that so interesting. So yeah,
I call it there's the subconscious work, and that is everything in this life, and then there's a super conscious work, and that is like everything in your past lives in the soul world, you without the body,
right?
Your eternal soul. And so past lives can get triggered just like the same as this life, right? So for me, I had so much fear coming from past lives because I've had a lot of death. And so basically, if you were spiritual in this life, you were spiritual in past lives, and it was not safe to be spiritual then. You have been burned, you have been stoned, you have been tortured, you have been had all these deaths. And so for me, what triggered my past lives was really becoming that entrepreneur, becoming visible. And I see this in a lot of women entrepreneurs, especially. We start to become visible, and in many previous lifetimes that was not allowed. That was very dangerous. Yeah. And so just like a smell triggers something in this life, is like a sensation can trigger something from past life. And then it's super confusing because you're like, I don't know why I'm feeling all this fear. It seems a little over the top for me just really starting a podcast or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. How do you, when you're in a session with a client, how do you recognize that you've gotten them to that state?
The mind knows. The mind is so smart, and the soul knows. I call myself a spiritual hypnotherapist, and it's the same as a regular hypnotherapist, but I believe I'm talking to the soul, where some people are like, there's a subconscious mind and there's chemicals in your mind. And that is all true, but I believe that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. Yeah. And so the mind is insanely powerful and knows exactly where to go. And sometimes, we'll go back, and oftentimes, I'll go back to a scene and I'll be like, this fear you're feeling at this time, when you're 8 years old, I was like, is this the start of it, or is it familiar? And they'd be like, no, it's like really familiar. And so I'm like, okay, let's go back to a different memory. And they'll be like 2 years old and be like, I have this fear. And it's like, it doesn't make sense because that. And I'll be like, okay, let's go back even further, and we'll go back and we will find the root cause. Yeah. When we find the root cause, there's that feeling like, am I crazy? Because there just seems to be no root cause to something, but there is always a root cause. Yeah. And so then we get to that, how many years of talk therapy would it get to be like, oh, when you were in the womb, your mother thought about aborting you.
Wow.
It's that sort of stuff, that level, that depth of healing, and that depth of feeling.
So when you're doing a session, do clients come in with the purpose of past life regression, or do you have specific, or is it kind of like they come in and you don't know how it's going to go, and you're just like...
So whenever someone comes to me for past life regression, I will typically start them with subconscious clearing stuff, because... although I have started to really trust people when they come in and say, hey, I want a past life. If they're kind of spiritual already, they get it. Some people are like, oh, it sounds fun and everything. And so how I kind of view it is, you have this ship, this is your life, this ship. And we want to plug up this ship before we go like jumping into other ships and figuring out what's going on. We got to make sure this ship is on course.
Right.
Yeah. And
That's
so
funny.
I typically, unless someone tells me they got a ton of hypnotherapy already and have done it like different modalities and things like that, then I might say, okay, we can start with past life. But the few times I've done that, I've kind of regretted it and been like, there was stuff to clear before we went there. So yeah, I'll typically encourage everyone to start with the subconscious clearing, because we've all got trauma. There's no one in this world who doesn't have trauma. So we'll do that. And so then at that point, we'll jump into the other boat. You get some context for your soul. And at that point, we'll jump into the ocean. And that is the soul world. And so that is you between your lifetimes. Between these incarnations where you're in the soul. And so the language of earth is fear, and the language of the soul world is love. And so you get to experience that bliss, that oneness, the unity, because it's a thing that you kind of like, it, but you don't know it, but it's kind of you. So you get to experience that. And then you get to meet your soul family, your soulmates. You have a spirit guide, and you can find out why you chose this life, why you chose other lives.
Wow.
You have this council of elders who you can ask any question under the sun.
That sounds amazing.
So magical. Yeah.
It does. Yeah. It's,
Well, this kind of reminds me of your SOS moment, like, have you found a lot of clients maybe more recently resisting to that? More so than often? Like, do you find a lot more resistance to wanting to access that kind of past life, or a resistance to finding their blockages or their traumas?
Do you mean more now than?
Yeah, maybe more now, or is it kind of the same? I wonder if the pandemic maybe has something to do with that.
Yeah, it's busy for sure.
Yeah.
A lot of people, to be honest, I sell myself, I market myself as someone who helps people get unstuck, releases old trauma and baggage, that kind of thing. Because there's two kinds of people. There's the person who comes in and they say like, oh, my problem is that like I have anxiety, and I'm like, no, your problem is that you have a spiritual wound that really needs to be healed. And then you have the person who comes in and is like, I have this spiritual thing needs healing, and I'm like, no, you have this like human wound, this human trauma wound. And so no matter who it is, like everyone needs to start at the start, and that is like fixing themselves up on the heart, and from the heart, the mind, and the soul, kind of uniting the whole thing. But I do believe it all comes back to the spiritual healing. That is, I do believe I'm a spiritual healer. But the soul journey, I feel those people are called. Those people are very called in to do it. I have so many people who are like so gung-ho. They're like, okay, I want to do it all. I want to do the subconscious clearing and heal my subconscious, and then I want to do the past life, and I want to know all my past lives, and then I want to do the soul journey. And so we'll do past lives, and they'll be like, whoa. And then I kind of won't hear from them for like weeks or months. And then it just takes a while to sometimes integrate it. Yeah. Because there's a period after your past life regression where you start to doubt that everything is real. You're like, well, I made it all up. I made it up. And so what it is that your mind can't hold two conflicting thoughts or beliefs. And so there's a belief that is like, I'm Michelle, I was born in Ireland on this day to my parents. And then there's this other new belief that is like, I'm an eternal soul. I've been through many lifetimes. I've been killed and murdered and come back, and I have a soul family, and I'm here and I have this soul purpose and this journey, and it's bigger than me. And that can be overwhelming. And even the most gung-ho people kind of get like
it's like you have to
that dissonance within. It's like it just takes some time to integrate it.
Like you have to learn to hold both of them, as opposed to being like, which is the truth, because they're both true.
Yeah. And you've had a little bit of work with that too.
I had a past lives reading. It wasn't hypnotherapy, but I did have a past lives reading that really did resonate with me a lot. And I'm really intrigued by things like that, because I definitely believe that our souls go on. Like, this isn't
Yeah.
our only life. And
Mhm.
you know, I don't attach it to a specific religion or anything, but my spirituality has grown a lot in especially like the last 5 or 6 years. And I had that reading probably 4 years ago. And it actually validated a lot of things that I've really known to be true in myself in very specific ways that were eerie. And yeah, I really believe in those things. I believe in that work. And I also do know, especially in LA, it's a matter of sifting through the bullshitters and people who aren't really in tune with something. Because for me, I'm like, the skepticism comes in the form of, I'm skeptical of people who claim to do it in the sense that I need to make sure I'm talking to someone who's really connected, not in the sense that I don't believe it's possible for someone to be connected to that, because I do believe that fully. And in talking to you and in talking to the woman who I had my reading with, I believe that. Like, I believe that that is possible, and people are, and you can get that insight from other humans who are able to translate these things. And so it's just, in my mind, it's a matter of sifting through, you know, people who are doing it for popularity or for their business or for, I mean, it is a business, but you know what I'm saying? In LA, everyone's like, oh, I'm a healer and I can take you to your past life. But not everybody has that depth of gift, but a lot of people really do. And if you find someone that does, I believe in that.
Yeah, and we actually all have we all have these awarenesses. It's just how deep they are and how much I believe that COVID is really helping us to have it rise to the surface.
Yeah.
That we needed this time to separate, to be separate from each other and to be still in ourselves. So I think there's a ton of awakening happening over the past 5 years, also over really the past year and a half, as we've all kind of like started to, you know, look inwards a lot more.
And I think there's a lot of what I experienced in my reading, which again, it wasn't hypnotherapy, but what it did for me was I had these juxtaposing sides of myself that my entire life didn't understand. Am I this or am I this? Like, am I just opposite sides of myself that I thought I had to figure out which one was real. And then, but I knew very well that they were both inside of me, like really different personality traits where I was like, do I like really nice things and really nice luxurious lifestyle? Or do I like to camp in the woods with one t-shirt for a week? Like, who am I? Because I am both of those things. And so, and having this, this reading with her, what it did for me was it gave me permission somehow to be like, I am these things. I am all of these things. And this is why. And now I can just stop trying to understand and why and which one is which, and just accept, no, I am. That is who I am. All of that is who I am. And so it's this weird, I don't know if you have had clients express that, but it's like, maybe it's a sense of validation for who you are that they didn't realize they even needed.
Yeah, that's it. You know, as I said, typically when someone comes in, I'm like, okay, we got to clear your trauma before we go and access that. And sometimes people do spontaneously just go in. So it's not like I'm holding anyone back from that. We go where we need to go. But yeah, oh my gosh, I've lost my train of thought.
The realizing of like different parts of yourself.
So I've really begun to trust that when a client comes in and they say like, you know, I've just kind of been following your thing with the past lives, and I think there's something there. It's like, now I trust them, and I say, yeah, if you think there is something there, there probably is something there.
Yeah,
you know?
You gotta like listen to that.
Yeah.
And I wonder, like, what kind of advice would you give people? And I feel like I could be one of them. You know, sometimes I feel like I can be intuitive, but sometimes I feel there's a real block there. And it could be just stubbornness in general. But what kind of advice would you give if you're kind of trying to figure out where the root of it is without maybe before even seeing someone with your talents?
Journal. That's what I would say is journal it, because thoughts just, they go round and round and round, and you don't even recognize this circular thinking pattern. You're like, but why this and why that and why that? And I do this because of this, because of that.
Yes.
And so what you'll find is that I don't have confidence because I'm not beautiful enough. I'm not beautiful enough because I don't have confidence, and I don't have confidence, or something like that. And we don't even recognize this stuff that runs this deepness. I mean, that's kind of just a very surface level example. But once you start to journal, look out for those where you get locked in a circular way of thinking. I remember I got a great piece of advice. I remember when I was starting out my coaching, I was like, I don't really want to market to my friends because I don't think I'm like good enough yet to like really like be good at coaching. So I don't want to waste I don't want to waste these people who could be my potential clients. And it's like, well, so if you feel like you're not good enough, why don't you just like market to them anyway? Because by the time you get good enough, you'll be good enough. So right, I was in this thing. I don't know if I'm explaining that right.
But no, that makes sense.
Yeah, let me think of how she said it. It was me just been locked in this way of thinking. Right. I'm not good enough to market myself, and then it's like, oh, but I'm too good to like, I want to wait till I'm good enough to be able to
right.
market.
That's a trap.
Yeah,
it's
right.
A trap.
And so
chicken or the egg.
Our minds create these traps. So journaling. I mean, have a good friend that you're able to talk these things out with. Invaluable. Yeah. Journaling is like free therapy. I mean, if you're consuming all of like the Instagram therapy stuff, if you kind of get that stuff, then journal it, because then if you have that awareness, if you're learning that stuff, we have such access to it on Instagram, on YouTube, podcasts, all that kind of thing. If you can't afford therapy, then your journal can be your therapist.
Yeah. And it also, I got a journal for my 9th birthday from a friend. And from that day on, I journaled. My whole life is filled, like volumes of journals. And what I've realized is that that's like, I think it was Joan Didion. There's a Joan Didion quote that says, if I was blessed with even limited access to my own mind, I wouldn't need to write. I write simply to discover what I'm thinking, something like that. And so it's like, because what happened, our thoughts, like you said, our thoughts fly by in our mind at such a rapid pace. It's way faster than we can write or verbalize. Yeah. So, you go through these thoughts and you're like, well, I know what I'm thinking. I don't need to write this down. But in speaking it or writing it down, it forces you to finish the sentence that you'd only half thought. And then in doing that, you literally like, I've learned so much about, I'm like, why am I writing down these thoughts I already had them. I don't need, but in writing them down, I'm like, oh, that's where, and then you see that these things that seem disjointed are completely connected, because it takes you from feeling like, oh, I have all these issues to, oh, it's really just one thing that is affecting all these areas.
Drill down. You write something, go like, why? Why do I think that? Why do I believe that?
Yeah.
And like, hold that discomfort and just go, well, maybe I'll just close up my journal for today. It takes emotional courage to do this.
And I know, before we let you go, like, I wonder too, is there such thing? Because sometimes I feel like I'm a new soul and sometimes I feel like I'm an old soul. Have you ever run into that a lot with your clients?
Yeah, I think the truth is that we're all old souls, because Earth is a tough place. And so there's all these other planets that we incarnate on, but Earth's like the difficult one, and we come here to feel and everything. So by the time we're getting to Earth, we're kind of an old soul already, just by kind of graduating to like incarnate. But then of course there's like the level of the age of your soul, of how many times you've incarnated. But it's also kind of like in terms of maturity, where you could have someone and they've been around for like 2,000 incarnations, but they're still stuck on the one lesson. They just still cannot get past this one lesson or whatever. Where there's younger souls that are just like, firing through it, because our souls are also expanding. Our souls are in the school too. And so even our guides are all in this like evolutionary process. So, I think as well with the guidance we get, sometimes it's not like the absolute like full stop kind of thing. Sometimes it's like we have to say we've got free will, we get to choose. That's why we're here. So the truth is that we're all old souls, but we all have like also like a soul character, and a soul, like a speed of learning, and a things that we're working on a soul. We actually have a job in the soul world as well. So some people are like making planets in the soul world, and some people are like studying humans or something like that.
So
and
cool.
so this stuff will come through, and in past lives, if you get like a past life regression where you go to multiple lives, you might see patterns of who you've been, what you've done. That is
so cool.
This is so fascinating. I would love to have a follow-up episode with you down the road, because I feel like we barely scratched the surface.
Yeah.
I also want to book a session with you.
Love that. We love that.
Thank you so much for being here, Moyra. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ladies. Just from the moment you got in touch, and I love your vibe, and it's so fun, and it's so deep, and it's so authentic.
Thank you.
I love that you're creative souls as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to staying in touch.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much. Well, I feel like I need to book a session now.
I know. I got the itch.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Moyra, for spending the time and talking to us. I hope this helped people out there. If you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling like you need to grow and evolve, and you've got some things that you haven't been addressing and putting off for a while, you're not the only one. Like, this has been the last couple years have been, quite the stuck feeling.
Yeah.
And it's time to prioritize your life, prioritize your journey, prioritize your mental health. If you're feeling like you need to, grow and evolve, we've got you. Because
we're all, and it's really, I love hearing about different techniques and different methods, and especially like all over the world, there's different, every culture has a different way of dealing with traumas and wellness and mental health and all of those things. And so, I think it's easy to get stuck in our bubbles of just like our westernized view of things, which is there are valid methods there as well, but there's not just one way. And so, I like learning about these new things, and I hope that everyone has an open mind to other options. It doesn't mean it's right for you. It doesn't mean it's the only way, and it doesn't mean your way is wrong. It's just, there's a lot out there in this world.
Yep. So if you liked what you heard, please go to @Moyra Michelle so you can reach out to her, so you can book a session. Check out her podcast, the Old Soul Social Club podcast. It's amazing. Her content's amazing. Everything she does. Check her out. And please shout out to Black Lives Matter.
Yes.
Shout out to our Patreon.
Where you can support us and help us grow. And you can access, like I said at the beginning of the episode, behind the scenes footage, bonus content, extended interviews. And in the near future, we will be having some merch drop. We're plotting. In that event, when we do, those Patreon members will have special access, special sale codes, early access, special offers. So you're not going to want to miss on that.
Yeah. And shout out to Steve and Nija for being OG patrons to the SOS podcast. So
yes.
Please follow us at the SOS Pod on Instagram and Twitter. Get us on YouTube. Subscribe to us, SOS with Molly and Alyssa, so you can see our beautiful faces during our interviews, and not just on your usual Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, wherever you find your podcasts. We are there. So subscribe, rate, review. It helps us reach more people.
Yes. And I'm Molly Cottrell.
I'm Alyssa Rosano.
Here's to turning meltdowns
and magic.